The road should not exist. At least that's what the map suggests. For nearly 19,000 miles, a single highway stretches across the Americas from the frozen wilderness of Alaska through deserts, mountains, megacities, and tropical rainforests. It is one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects ever attempted. The Pan-American Highway, and then it simply stops. No bridge, no tunnel, no detour, just jungle, an endless wall of green between Panama and Colombia known as the Darién Gap, a place where roads disappear, governments lose control, and people vanish. In 2022, a father carrying his young son through the Darien watched the child slip into a flooded river after a sudden surge of water. Rescue efforts failed. The boy was never found. His father kept walking. In the Darien, stopping can be just as dangerous as moving forward. Stories like this are one reason. Aid workers describe the jungle as one of the world's most dangerous migration routes. Every year, hundreds of thousands of migrants enter these forests, families carrying children, teenagers traveling alone, people fleeing poverty, violence, and political instability. Many have never set foot in a rainforest before, yet they willingly enter one of the harshest environments on Earth. Some emerge days later exhausted, injured, and starving. Others never emerge at all. But nature is only part of the story. Because deep inside the Darien, travelers enter a world controlled by forces that don't appear on maps. Smugglers, human traffickers, armed criminal groups. What was once a remote stretch of jungle has become one of the busiest migration corridors on the planet. A place where migration, organized crime, environmental protection, and human survival collide. Tonight we're entering the Darién Gap to uncover why the world's most important highway suddenly ends, why hundreds of thousands of people risk crossing a place known for death and disappearance, and why this small patch of jungle has become one of the most important places on Earth. The Pan-American Highway made a bold promise that one day you could leave the Arctic Ocean in Alaska and drive across an entire hemisphere, through Canada, the United States, Mexico, past volcanoes, deserts, snow-covered mountains, and sprawling capitals, eventually reaching the southern tip of South America. Not a single highway, but a network of roads connecting nearly every nation in the Americas. A night symbol that two continents could be linked by asphalt instead of oceans. In 1937, 14 countries signed the Convention on the Pan-American Highway, committing themselves to completing this extraordinary vision. Over the following decades, thousands of miles of roads were built. Bridges crossed rivers. Engineers conquered landscapes once thought impossible. Only one task remained: finish the final gap. Today, if you follow the highway south through Panama, everything feels normal. Traffic flows. Gas stations, restaurants, and towns line the route. Then you reach Yaviza. The asphalt ends. The traffic disappears. Ahead lies nothing but rainforest. No highway, no bridge, no border crossing. One of the longest road systems ever built simply stops. Most people seeing it for the first time ask the same question. Why? Because the nearest paved road on the Colombian side lies more than 60 miles away. Between them stands the Darién Gap, a vast region of rainforest, mountains, rivers, and swamps that has resisted completion for generations. For decades, governments tried to change that. Survey teams entered the forest. Routes were proposed. Funding was discussed. By the 1970s, many believed the missing link would finally be built. Then came the complications. What happens when a highway cuts through one of the most biodiverse rainforests in the Americas? What happens to the Embera, Wunan, and Guna communities who have lived here for centuries? What happens when the natural barrier separating livestock diseases in South America from North America disappears? And what happens when a road connecting two continents also creates a faster route for traffickers? And organized crime? The project stopped being an engineering challenge. It became an environmental, public health, security, and human challenge. Every solution solved one problem and created another. So the years passed, then the decades. Governments changed. New proposals appeared. Old proposals disappeared. The road never moved another mile. Today, the end of the highway at Yaviza is more than a dead end. It's a reminder that even in the modern world, there are still places where human ambition meets its limits. And beyond that limit lies the Darien, a place where the deeper you go, the more you realize. The forest isn't trying to defeat you, it's simply refusing to help you survive. From the end of the road at Yavisa, the rules change. The map may still show Panama and Colombia, but once you step into the Darien, borders stop mattering. Nature makes the decisions now. At first, the jungle almost feels welcoming. Towering trees block the sun. Bright birds flash through the canopy. Monkeys call from somewhere deep in the forest. Everything looks alive, because it is. The Darien is one of the most biodiverse places in the Americas, and a vital corridor linking wildlife between North and South America. Its ecological importance is one reason. Conservationists have long opposed building a highway through it. But beauty can be deceptive. The rainforest isn't trying to impress you, it's trying to survive. And if you're walking through it, you're simply in the way. The first thing people remember is the heat. The air feels heavy. Within minutes, sweat soaks through your clothes. Nothing dries. Then comes the rain. Storms can arrive without warning, turning trails into mud and rivers into dangerous crossings. Aid workers regularly treat migrants suffering from injuries, infections, and exhaustion after days in the jungle. The rivers are especially unforgiving. Crossings often require ropes, human chains, or simply trusting that the current isn't stronger than it looks. During the rainy season, water levels can rise suddenly, sweeping away entire groups. The jungle rarely announces danger. It simply changes the rules. Then come the insects. Mosquitoes, ticks, biting flies. Diseases such as malaria and dengue remain a threat, while constant moisture can turn even minor wounds into serious problems. And then night falls. The forest never becomes quiet. Howler monkeys roar across the valleys. Branches crack in the darkness. Leaves rustle beyond the light. Every sound raises the same question. What made that noise? One migrant later described the nights by saying, "The jungle never lets you forget that you're the weakest thing inside it." And perhaps that's the greatest misconception about the Darien. People imagine one obstacle. The reality is different. The jungle wears you down. One blister, one missed meal, one sleepless night, until exhaustion begins making decisions for you. That is how the Darien has humbled explorers, soldiers, engineers, and hundreds of thousands of migrants. But when survivors were later asked what frightened them most, many didn't mention the jungle at all. Because somewhere beyond these rivers, someone is watching, waiting for desperate travelers to emerge from the trees. And unlike nature, their intentions are anything but random. By the time most people enter the Darien, they've already traveled thousands of miles. Some crossed half a continent. Others crossed an ocean. Many have spent nearly everything they own. Turning around is no longer an option. The journey usually begins near the Colombian coastal town of Nicoclí. Once a quiet beach town, it has become one of the busiest gateways to the Darien. Every day, boats carry migrants toward the edge of the jungle. Families with children, teenagers traveling alone, people speaking Spanish, French, Arabic, Mandarin, and dozens of other languages. Most have never met, yet they're all chasing the same thing: hope. As the boats pull away, the atmosphere changes. Some people pray, others stare silently at the water. Everyone has heard the stories. The robberies, the rivers, the people who never made it out. But hope has a way of making danger feel distant. Then the boats stop. Backpacks go on. The first steps are taken. And just like that, the road behind them disappears. Within hours, reality sets in. The trail narrows. The heat intensifies. Every step becomes harder. Parents take turns carrying exhausted children. The excitement fades. Survivors often describe a place known as Death Hill. The name wasn't given by officials. Migrants gave it that name. After hours of climbing steep, muddy slopes, many reach the top expecting relief. Instead, they see more hills stretching into the distance. One Venezuelan migrant later recalled bursting into tears at the summit, not from relief, but from realizing the journey had barely begun. By the second day, conversations grow quiet. People stop talking about where they're going. They talk about water, food, rest. The next river crossing, nothing else matters. As exhaustion grows, the trail begins revealing what came before. A child's shoe, a torn passport, a broken wheelchair, family photographs soaked by rain, reminders of what people were forced to leave behind. And sometimes something more haunting. Bodies, aid workers, journalists, and migrants have all documented encounters with the dead along the route. Some drowned, Some succumbed to illness or exhaustion. Many were never identified. One migrant later said the hardest part wasn't seeing a body. It was watching people walk past it, not because they didn't care, because they couldn't afford to stop. Food runs low, water becomes scarce, small injuries become serious problems. And in a place with no doctors, no hospitals, and no easy way out, even minor setbacks can become life-threatening. One humanitarian doctor later observed that many migrants weren't suffering from a single major injury. They were suffering from dozens of smaller ones. Cuts, infections, dehydration, exhaustion, individually survivable, together potentially fatal. Yet after enduring all of this, many survivors say the jungle wasn't their greatest fear. Nature weakens people, but deeper in the forest another threat is waiting, one that chooses its victims. And for thousands of migrants every year, that's when the real nightmare begins. By the third or fourth day, most migrants have lost something: their strength, their food, their sense of time. And that's often when another danger begins. The Darien isn't lawless, it's controlled. Not by governments, but by people who understand the jungle just as well as anyone. Long before hundreds of thousands of migrants arrived, criminal groups knew the value of this forest. For decades, the Darien served as a remote smuggling corridor. When migration surged, those same routes became valuable for another reason. People. Every exhausted traveler entering the jungle became a potential customer, or a victim. The system begins long before the forest. In towns like Necoclí, migrants often spend days waiting for boats and gathering information. Some advice is genuine, some is designed to make money. One wrong decision can cost a family everything. By the time many reach the jungle, they've already spent thousands of dollars, often their life savings. And desperation creates opportunity. A Colombian journalist once described the route with a simple observation: wherever people are forced to move in large numbers, someone will build a business around them. In the Darien, that business operates in the shadows. Some guides help migrants navigate the safest routes. Others disappear after being paid. Some abandon groups the moment conditions become dangerous. And deep inside the jungle, there is rarely anyone to call for help. Survivors describe reaching river crossings only to hear the price suddenly increase, pay more, or find another way. Often there is no other way. Then come the robberies. Humanitarian organizations have documented repeated accounts of armed groups stopping migrants and demanding cash, phones, passports, and valuables. One Venezuelan migrant hid $20 inside the sole of his shoe before entering the jungle. "I knew if they found all my money," he later said, "I wouldn't be able to buy food after reaching Panama." Others lost everything in minutes: money, medicine, identification, even their shoes. And once those possessions disappear, the journey doesn't stop. It simply becomes harder. Aid groups have also documented reports of violence and sexual assault, particularly against women and girls. Many cases are believed to go unreported. For humanitarian workers, these stories have become tragically familiar. The migration economy now generates millions of dollars each year for transport operators, brokers, guides, and criminal networks. It's built on a single resource: human desperation. And perhaps the most unsettling part is that most migrants already know the risks. They've watched the videos, read the warnings, spoken to survivors. Some have even lost relatives on the journey. Yet they keep coming, because for many, the danger behind them feels greater than the danger ahead. Think about that for a moment. How difficult must life become for a jungle filled with floods, disease, and armed criminals to feel like the better option? Because the story of the Darien doesn't begin in the rainforest. It begins thousands of miles away, in homes where families face an impossible decision: stay or risk everything. It's easy to look at the Darién Gap and ask one question: why would anyone willingly enter one of the world's most dangerous jungles? The answer doesn't begin in the Darien. It begins thousands of miles away. No one crosses this jungle for adventure. Most arrive because life elsewhere left them with no other choice. For one Venezuelan family, that moment came when both parents lost their jobs. Savings disappeared. Food became harder to afford. They sold what little they owned, packed a few clothes into backpacks, and began walking north. Thousands of miles later, they reached the edge of the Darien. A mother later told aid workers, "The jungle wasn't our first choice. It was our last." That single sentence explains more than any statistic. The same story repeats in different forms. Haitians fleeing instability, Ecuadorians escaping organized crime, families from Afghanistan, Cameroon, China, India, and dozens of other countries who first fly to South America before beginning the long journey north. Different languages, different cultures, the same destination, the road that ends. Inside Panama's migrant reception centers, conversations unfold in Spanish, French, Portuguese, Arabic, Mandarin, and languages from West Africa. Children play together despite not sharing a common language. Parents exchange food, medicine, and phone chargers. For a brief moment, strangers from every corner of the world become part of the same journey. As more people arrived, the Darién Gap transformed from an isolated wilderness into one of the world's busiest migration corridors. Just a decade ago, annual crossings were measured in the thousands. By 2023, Panama recorded more than 500,000 crossings. More than 500,000 people walking through a rainforest without a single highway. The impact spread far beyond the jungle. Small villages like Bajo, Chiquito suddenly received thousands of exhausted migrants every week. 8 organizations expanded emergency operations, while medical teams treated dehydration, injuries, infections, and trauma on an unprecedented scale. And the journey didn't end there. Most continued north through Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico, and eventually toward the United States. The Darien had become the first major obstacle in a migration route, stretching across an entire hemisphere. As the crossings increased, political debate intensified. Some argued stronger borders were the answer. Others pointed to deeper causes: economic collapse, political instability, gang violence, corruption, natural disasters, and climate change. The jungle creates none of these problems. It simply exposes them. Yet despite the risks, the crowds keep growing. Not because the Darien has become safer, but because the forces pushing people toward it remain just as powerful. And that has revived an old question. If hundreds of thousands of people already cross the Darien every year, why not finally build the missing road? Would it solve the problem, or create an even bigger one? Because the reasons that highway was never completed go far beyond engineering. If the Darien has become one of the world's busiest migration routes, why not finally finish the highway? Wouldn't a road make rescue operations easier, weaken criminal networks, connect the last missing link between North and South America? For decades, many believed it would. Yet every serious proposal eventually stalled. At first, engineers blamed the jungle. The terrain is brutal. Mountains, rivers, relentless rain, and unstable ground would make construction expensive and maintenance constant. But humanity has built highways through the Andes, across deserts and over oceans. Engineering was never the real obstacle. The first major opposition came from scientists. The Darien is one of the last uninterrupted tropical forests in the Americas, a biological bridge where jaguars, tapirs, harpy eagles, and thousands of other species still move freely between 2 continents. A road wouldn't simply cut through the forest. It would split an entire ecosystem. And history shows what often follows. Roads attract logging. Logging attracts settlements. Settlements expand into farmland. Before long, vast stretches of rainforest disappear. Scientists warned that Darien could follow the same path. Once opened, it could never truly return to what it was. Then there was another concern few people expected: livestock disease. For decades, the Darien has acted as a natural barrier against foot and mouth disease spreading. Between South and North America, a continuous highway could increase the movement of infected animals, threatening an agricultural industry worth billions. Suddenly, the debate wasn't just about transportation. It was also about food security. Then came the voices of the people who had lived here for generations. The Embera, the Wunan, the Guna. To outsiders, this looked like undeveloped land. To them, it was home. As one Embera leader explained, the forest is our supermarket, our pharmacy, our school. Roads elsewhere had brought deforestation, outsiders, and the gradual loss of traditional ways of life. Many feared the Darien would be no different. Even some security experts opposed the project. A highway wouldn't only move tourists and trade. It could also move traffickers, weapons, illegal loggers, and organized crime much faster than dense jungle ever could. The forest itself acts as a natural barrier. Remove that barrier and entirely new problems could emerge. By now, the missing road had become far more than an engineering challenge. It was an environmental decision, a cultural decision, an economic decision, a security decision. Every solution seemed to create another problem. So governments delayed, studies were commissioned, new routes were proposed. Then quietly, the plans faded away. Over time, the unfinished highway stopped being viewed as a failure. Instead, it became one of the world's most controversial decisions never made. Because if the final stretch is ever paved, the Darién Gap won't simply disappear from the map. The entire region could change forever. For nearly a century, the road has ended here. Generations believed someone would eventually finish it. No one did. But while the highway stood still, the Darien did not. It changed. Quietly at first, then faster than anyone expected. Take the village of Bajo Chiquito. For generations, this small Embera community sat deep inside the Panamanian rainforest. Families fished the rivers. Children walked forest trails to school. Visitors were rare and the outside world felt far away. Today, during periods of heavy migration, thousands of exhausted people can pass through the area within days. A village once known only to its residents has become one of the world's best-known migration checkpoints. One Embera resident told journalists, "Before, we only knew the people from our neighboring villages. Now every day we meet people from countries we've never even heard of." That single sentence captures how dramatically the Darien has changed. The road never arrived. The world did. Every day, the jungle receives people speaking dozens of languages. Some flee war. Others escape hunger, violence, or economic collapse. Some hope to reunite with family. Others simply want a safer future for their children. Different stories. One trail. Governments continue searching for answers. Panama and Colombia have increased security operations. The United States and other countries have invested in efforts to reduce irregular migration and disrupt smuggling networks. Aid organizations continue providing food, shelter, and medical care. But none of these measures solve the deeper problem. The forces driving migration begin far beyond the jungle, in collapsing economies, political crises, organized crime, and natural disasters. The Darien doesn't create those problems. It simply exposes them. Which brings us back to the unfinished road. Supporters argue it would improve trade, create jobs, connect the continents, and make rescue operations easier. Critics warn it could accelerate deforestation, threaten indigenous lands, encourage illegal logging, and create new opportunities for organized crime. Both sides make compelling arguments, which is exactly why nothing has changed. The Darien is no longer just an engineering challenge. It has become a question of priorities. What should humanity build? What should it protect? And are there places better left untouched? Perhaps one day highways and bridges will replace jungle trails. Or perhaps future generations will decide that some frontiers are worth preserving. Not because we couldn't conquer them, but because the cost would be too high. Until then, the Darién Gap remains one of the last great frontiers of the Americas, a place where nature still has the final vote, where the road ends, but the questions never do. At the beginning of this documentary, we asked a simple question: why does the most important road in the Americas simply stop? After everything we've uncovered, the answer isn't a missing stretch of asphalt, because the Darién Gap was never just about a road. It's about people. Every sunrise somewhere in Colombia, another family tightens the straps on their backpacks. A father lifts his daughter onto his shoulders. A mother checks that the last bottle of water is still there. Someone says a quiet prayer. Someone makes one final phone call home, and then they take the first step, not knowing if they'll ever return. Hundreds of miles away, an Embera child walks to school through the same rainforest his grandparents once explored in silence. The forest is still his home, but now almost every day, strangers emerge from the trees, speaking languages he's never heard and chasing futures he'll never see. For him, the world arrived without ever building a road. Meanwhile, scientists continue, fighting to protect one of the richest ecosystems on Earth. Aid workers continue, treating exhausted survivors. Governments debate policy. Engineers still ask whether the final gap in the Pan-American Highway should ever be completed, and the jungle simply keeps growing. It doesn't care about borders, politics, or history. It has watched empires rise, nations form, and roads spread across continents. Through it all, the Darien has remained. Perhaps that's why this place fascinates us. In a world where almost every mystery has been mapped and every frontier pushed back, the Darién Gap reminds us that some places still refuse to bend to human plans. We celebrate the roads we build, the bridges we finish, the distances we conquer. But perhaps the most remarkable road in the Americas is the one that was never completed. Not because humanity lacked the technology, but because the real question was never engineering. It was values, connection or preservation, progress or protection. There may never be a perfect answer, and maybe that's exactly the point. Some roads are built to connect the world. Others remind us that not everything can or should be connected. Tomorrow morning, another boat will leave the Colombian coast. Another group of strangers will disappear beneath the rainforest canopy. Another chapter in the story of the Darien will begin. The road will still end. The jungle will still remain. And the question we've been asking for nearly 100 years will still be waiting. If you enjoyed this documentary and want more, stories hidden beyond the headlines and beyond the maps, consider subscribing. Every week, we explore the places, people, and mysteries that continue to shape our world. Until next time, thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the most important journey begins where the road ends.